Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome. So, couple of things before we get started. So, obviously, we're a week behind because of one class behind, not really a week behind. Class behind because of our guest lecture that we had on last week, last Wednesday. So, anyways, the exam will be put up. I know it says on the syllabus it's supposed to be already up this week, but because we are essentially 1 week behind or one class behind, I'll put up the exam on by Monday, maybe even Sunday, and so you'll have uh, all week to take it. So the exam will encompass the first lecture, all the way through film exhibition. So I think that's one, two, I think like five or six, I think it's 6 lectures more or less. Any questions?
Yes, Professor. Will the exam cover both lecture and what's on the book for the
Yeah.
reading?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Good
And
question. Yes.
okay. And will you go over what those exact readings are?
It's on the syllabus.
Okay, so everything that's on there. Okay, great. Thank you.
I would think it. Gosh. Chapter one for sure. The movie chapter for sure. Uh, the special events chapter for sure. Those three for sure. I don't think there's anything else assigned. One, two. Yeah, I think it's the film chapter, which I don't know what chapter that is in. I think that's chapter two. I'm not sure. Special events chapter, which I think is 15, and then chapter one. But it's on the syllabus for sure. Any other questions?
Will there be any questions based off of the presentation from last class on the exam?
Well, from the guest lecture, that's a good question.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, thank you.
And it's all a multiple choice, right? Is it similar to like the quiz structure?
It's exactly like the quiz structure.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
It's just more questions, obviously, but exactly the same. So if you've been doing well on the quizzes, that's a good sign. If you haven't been doing well on the quizzes, I don't really like to give test advice because I'm not a test expert, but I would change my tactics. Whatever it is that you're doing, it's not working, I would change it to something else. So try to figure out what works for you, which is pretty open-ended, and I know it sounds vague, but I don't really know how a lot of you learn, or most of you learn. So everybody learns in a different way. Me personally, right? I take a lot of notes, and I use flashcards, and I used to put flashcards up on the wall or on the floor, and I'd see the word and I'd flip it over. That's how I remember things. But again, I don't know how all of you remember. Another thing that I used to do was that whenever I read things, I would record them. So as opposed to rereading it again, I would record it and listen to it and listen as opposed to reading it, only because I felt like if I was using a different sense, it would help me. But again, I don't know. I don't know. That's things that work for me. I don't know if it would work for you. So some of you are doing fine. I'm just giving out that advice for those of you who may not be doing fine.
And you said how many questions was it?
50,
50. Okay.
more or less. Well, actually, I was asked a couple more. It's never less. So this part, go ahead.
sorry, just to confirm, there's no study guide that for us to be focusing on more of one thing than another, or is it just a general review of those chapters that have been covered in the lectures?
General review. No study guide, no. Now you can develop your own study guide. That might be helpful. Based off the questions that I already asked. Other questions?
And how much time do we have? You said an hour, right? So,
No, you have more than an hour.
cool.
Probably more like two
Okay.
hours.
Awesome. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Never, you don't get well, I know some professors ask, it's a minute a question, right? For some professors, that's the general. A lot of professors
Yes, it's the
operate.
worst.
Excuse me?
Yes, they normally do like a question per minute, and it's
Right.
the worst.
I give you 2 minutes per question. So a little bit more. So I don't know if time is a factor. For most of you, I don't think time will be a factor. I don't think most of the time, most of the students who take the exam, if you've studied, generally speaking, finish in about between an hour and a half. Most of you. So generally time is not something that is an issue in terms of like stressing you out for time. But again, I'm just talking in generality. So I don't think most of you are going to have issues with time, but we'll see. I have faith that you'll finish all in about an hour and a half. Give or take 15 minutes. Other questions? No other questions? Okay, so let's start talking about home entertainment. This is an industry that's changing rapidly, as you know, of course, especially with the development of Netflix, and of course we have Disney Plus that's now here, and so the industry has been evolving very quickly, very fast. And so we'll talk a little bit about the past, a little bit about the old, but also get into the new as well. So let's start with the first sale doctrine. So the first sale doctrine is a little bit of the old, and it doesn't really apply so well with the new. And so basically the first sale doctrine was something that was developed and applied very much to the old traditional home entertainment. I'm sure most of you or some of you probably remember Blockbuster and those sorts of stores. And so it applied to those sorts of stores because essentially when the studio, right, made a copy of the movie and they sold it legally to the retailer, whether that retailer was Walmart or Target, whether it was a mom and pop video store, it didn't really matter. It essentially was a transfer of sale. In other words, whoever bought that copy legally could go turn around and resell it for a profit, or that person or that business could take that copy and re-rent that copy as many times as they wanted, as long as they bought that first copy legally. So in other words, the rights of the distributor ended after the first sale. And so it doesn't really work well with digital, because really, if you think about it, right, when you buy a digital copy of a movie or of a song or really of anything, right, that's digital, you're not really transferring a physical copy, right, to the person, the consumer. You're essentially you're keeping a copy, right, as a distributor, and you're giving them a copy as the consumer. And so it's kind of doesn't really transfer very well because, again, the first sale doctrine literally meant that you were transferring over a copy of the DVD, right, to the buyer. In this case, it's kind of it's sort of like a transfer, and it doesn't really apply very well. So I suspect, and this hasn't happened yet, that they're going to have to modify this for the digital world, because it doesn't really work for digital movies, digital books, or any stuff that's really digital. So anyways, a trendsetter was the idea of magnetic video. So I don't know if you guys remember the old VHSs. I don't know how old you are. I'm assuming most of you are young, if not all of you are young. And so literally, magnetic video was the first VHS distributor that literally would make copies of the big fat VHS and duplicate them and mail them to you, distribute them. So that was really the first distributor of motion pictures. For the most part, if I remember correctly, a lot of the movies that magnetic video did were smaller movies, but also a lot of documentaries. So please don't forget the importance of magnetic video. It most certainly will be on your quiz today when I post it. Universal versus Sony. It's a very important Supreme Court case. The SU stands for, and the CO stands for Supreme Court. I should have just said SC. But anyway, Supreme Court case between Universal and Sony. And so the court case itself centered on the idea of time shifting and whether or not time shifting was an example of copyright infringement. And so Sony had this thing called the Betamax, right? This machine that essentially allowed you to record movies or television programs at your house. It enabled you to time shift. And Universal got mad and basically said that, Sony copying or allowing copies of movies or the copying of a movie was a form of trademark infringement. And so this court case went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the court, thankfully, ruled in favor of Sony. So Sony wins the court case 5-4. But as you can see, it was a really close court case. And so eventually it was settled. And the court basically said that time shifting is not copyright infringement, and that essentially time shifting or you recording content on a machine, whether it's a VHS or a Betamax, is essentially fair use. In other words, you can go ahead and do it without any problems. And so thankfully, right, the courts ruled in favor of Sony and not in favor of Universal, because really if Universal would have won, it probably would have stopped the VHS machine or the Betamax machine right in its tracks, and who knows where we'd be right now. So after that, there was another format battle, and this format battle centered around the Betamax and the VHS. And so this guy does a really good job of explaining why exactly the VHS won. So here's a short video.
This mighty machine sparked a revolution in our use of media. It's a Sony Betamax video cassette recorder from 1979. This monster weighs about 36 pounds. The engineer in me finds it fascinating. There's nothing digital. It's a truly analog machine. All moving pieces and parts. Early adopters of the Betamax used it to record television shows, a revolutionary concept at the time because prior to the Betamax, you had to watch a show when it was broadcast. It threatened the entertainment industry so much that in 1979, they argued that recording television shows at home infringed on their copyright. It all came to a head in a Supreme Court case, Sony Corporation of America versus Universal City Studios, where 5 justices allowed home recording. Although Sony won this court battle, they ultimately lost out to a machine that used this size tape. This is a VHS recorder made by Sony's great rival, JVC. Both machines solve the same problem, how to store information compactly on a tape. Here's the brilliant innovation used by both machines. The machine grabs the tape, drags it forward as this silver drum starts to spin rapidly. The drum has two electromagnets called heads arranged on opposite sides of the drum that read the magnetic information on the tape. That rotating head allowed for a compact recorder. In many previous recorders, the magnetic heads didn't move, only the tape. Because there was a limit to how fast the tape could move, it took a lot of tape, about a 7-inch reel, to record an hour, which meant that a movie would need two 7-inch reels inside a cassette. So the rotating heads dramatically reduced the amount of tape needed, reducing the size to where it could be easily held in a cassette. So if the machines are so similar, why did Betamax lose to JVC? Many thought the Betamax machine would win. It had the better image quality, and the Betamax is decidedly better built. Compare ejecting a tape on the Betamax to the VHS. First, watch the Betamax. Note how smooth it is, and then watch the VHS. That's abrupt and will wear out the mechanism, yet, to my engineer's eye, the VHS was the better solution. First, the VHS was lighter than the Betamax, 29.5 pounds compared to 36 pounds for this Betamax machine. That's a huge difference for a mass-manufactured object. It impacts everything from material costs to assembly time to shipping costs. So, at the low end of the market, the VHS machines were cheaper than Sony's Betamax. Second, the earliest Betamax tapes played for only 1 hour, VHS played for 2 hours, enough time for a movie. The ultimate killer, though, was the rental market. Well, Betamax focused its ads and energies on time shifting. Their ads featured headlines like "Watch Whatever, Whenever." Well, JVC, the maker of the VHS system, created relationships with the nascent video rental industry. When this market grew, VHS dominated in titles. And while you could for a while find both formats, eventually retailers began giving shelf space to the slightly more dominant brand, which then dominated even more. So, the Betamax versus VHS dispels the notion that simply being first to market is the most important issue. It reminds us that technical excellence in one area isn't enough, here the superior picture quality of Betamax, but that all technical aspects matter. For any mass-manufactured object, the winner is usually the one that is just good enough. I'm Bill Hammack, the Engineer Guy.
So again, if you think about it, let's see. The Betamax was heavy. It was a really heavy machine, but it really was a way better quality just in terms of visual. I don't know if anybody's ever watched the Betamax versus the VHS. The VHS tape, visually speaking, is not even close to the quality of the Betamax. But again, as the speaker pointed out, the professor on the video, which again I'll quiz you on, the most important reason, right, that VHS won is because they did a better job of marketing, reaching out to the retailers who eventually were going to make decisions on which type of format they were going to place on their shelves. Or Betamax didn't really reach out to the retailers. VHS did, and that helped VHS become the dominant brand or technology within the industry. And also the length of the tape was another very important factor. As the movie industry was starting to release a lot of its movies onto tape, the idea that Betamax had only an hour-long tape, right? In other words, you needed to have, let's say, a 2-hour movie, you needed 2 Betamax tapes, put one in, an hour goes by, take it out, and you have to walk up and put it back in. Where the VHS had complete 2 hours. So that was a big deal. Other people, this is another hypothesis that I heard regarding, this is centered around sports. The big argument, at least within the sports industry, is that one of the reasons why a lot of sports fans liked the VHS versus the Betamax is that the VHS tape actually allowed you to record most of the football game. Because, right, if you think about the length of a football game, you can record most of it in 2 hours, whereas the Betamax only allowed you to record one. It's another non-related to movie reason why VHS won. So as you can see here, OTT, which stands for over the top, over the top, basically meaning that nowadays, because think about Disney Plus or Netflix or Amazon, all these over the top services, essentially basically means they can bypass traditional distributors, right? You no longer need a cable to be running on its cable or a satellite. You kind of just run on its own over the top. So what's the home structure for the home entertainment industry? Please don't forget this. It's an oligopoly. Again, it's an oligopoly. So you have a handful of sellers, right, that control the industry. Those handful are the Disneys, right, the Warner Brothers, the Universals, the Sonys, et cetera, et cetera. A few more. All right, so let's talk about the first trendsetter within the industry, and also sort of like, hopefully you're taking note of the fact of how quickly things move within this industry. So as you can see here, Blockbuster started in 1985. And one of the reasons why Blockbuster became the dominant store or within this particular industry was the fact that they used a depth of copies. So again, they used depth of copies. In other words, and I'm sure some of you remember Blockbuster, they had walls, right? Whenever a big movie came out, they would have like, 60, 70, 80, 100 copies of the movie on their wall. So you knew for a fact, right, when this movie came out on to VHS or to DVD, that if you went to the local Blockbuster, they would have all these copies for you. And so the chances of you getting a copy at the Blockbuster was much better than getting a copy at a mom and pop store, which may be able to only afford, a handful of copies. So Blockbuster, again, used depth of copies to essentially become the leader in the industry. And of course, those depth of copies were usually, blockbuster hits that everybody wanted to see again in home video. And so the other thing that Blockbuster did that was really cool and interesting is that they basically changed the industry in terms of its relationship with the distributor. So it used to be early on, before Blockbuster became big, that if you wanted to watch a movie on VHS, it cost a lot of money. To get a copy on VHS, the studios would charge you about $100, if not, or maybe a little bit less, but it was a lot of money. It's about $100. And so what Blockbuster did was that they were able to negotiate with the studios and basically told them or asked them and said, hey, as opposed to charging our business a lot of money for a DVD or VHS, why don't you give it to us for a low purchasing price or even for free? And what we'll do is if you give us to us at a low price or for free, we will create a revenue sharing model with the studios. So in other words, right, so every time you would go a rental, let's say a $5 rental, for instance, at a Blockbuster, a portion of that rental money would go to the studio, and then a portion Blockbuster would keep. And so they're the ones that started this revenue sharing model in the industry. So Blockbuster was sort of, they were hip early on within the industry. So as you can see here, obviously from the screen, Blockbuster reached its peak in terms of stores. In 2004, they reached a milestone of 9,000 stores. And so what ends up happening, when I'm referring to as competition, really what I'm referring to here is Netflix. So Netflix really forced Blockbuster to change its model, its business model, and really forced it to improve its customer relations. And what I mean by that is, number one, they were forced to sort of guarantee availability to customers. And number two, in order to improve their customer relations, one of their big revenue streams was, at one point in time, the late fees. I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but I remember a few times I would forget for whatever reason. I don't know why. And, sometimes they'd charge me like $20 in late fees for the movies that I had checked out, and I had just totally like, spaced out, and I forgot about it. That's right. That's right, Zulma. Very good. Yeah, a huge revenue stream for Blockbuster was this idea of the late fees. And so that really hurt Blockbuster because obviously Netflix, right? If you think about it, there was no late fees for Netflix. Netflix, you could hold on to a DVD disc of a Netflix film or a television program, and you can have it for months. They wouldn't care, right? They wouldn't charge you any late fees. And so Blockbuster, because of the late fees and because of this competition, essentially had to change their business model, and they had to do away with their late fees. And so eventually they start spiraling down after 2004 and end up having to file for Chapter 11. Chapter 11 essentially means that the company's in trouble, and essentially means that they're going to, restructure their debt or restructure their management and to try to save the company. So during this time, it was bought by Dish Network. Dish thought that they can revitalize the brand, but then all of a sudden, Dish said, "You know what? We can't save the brand. It's too old. It's outdated. People rather prefer Netflix versus Blockbuster." And so Dish eventually closes all its stores, and so now there's only one store left, to my knowledge. I think it's still left. My friends in Oregon told me recently it was still there. But anyways, there was one store left in Oregon, in Bend, Oregon, and essentially it's an Airbnb, which I think is a really clever idea. So in other words, you can rent out this Blockbuster store, and I think they still have movies in there, and you can spend the night in Airbnb in a Blockbuster. Which again, I think it's a pretty clever idea. Chapter 7, Shelby, is a bankruptcy or liquidation. So yes, Chapter 11 essentially means you file for bankruptcy, which gives you time to fix things, and Chapter 7 means that you liquidate. And so they, in 2018, essentially when Dish closed all its stores, it filed for Chapter 7, which means liquidation. So Chapter 11 means file for bankruptcy, but doesn't necessarily mean you're bankrupt. Chapter 7 means you liquidate, which means you are gone. So you might wonder what the heck happened to Blockbuster. Why did it fail? And really, this should be, I would say, a cautionary tale to all of us, especially those of you who want to work in entertainment or want to work in media, or just the idea of forget even that, just the idea of trying to remain hip and cool and relevant. So who is Warren Lieberfarb? Please remember this for your quiz. Warren Lieberfarb is considered to be the father of the DVD. So again, Warren Lieberfarb is considered to be the father of the DVD. Warren Lieberfarb was the head of or president of Warner Home Video. So historically speaking, Warner Home Video is the leader in home entertainment. I know you think Disney's the leader in everything. They're not. And so in the world of home entertainment, historically, it's Warner Brothers or Warner. And so Warren Lieberfarb, again, the father of the DVD, wanted to create a DVD rental window. So again, he wanted to create a DVD rental window. Just like there was a VHS rental window, he wanted to create one with the DVD. And so essentially, he was willing to give Blockbuster 60% of every transaction, and they essentially get 40%, a 60-40 split. in favor of Blockbuster. And so Blockbuster declined the offer. They didn't think that the DVD machine was going to take off. And I know we're thinking now in hindsight, all the years later, well, how could they not think that? Well, the VHS was pretty well ingrained already, and the thought was that people weren't going to want to change technologies so quickly, right? To go from VHS to a DVD. They were wrong, obviously, but the Blockbuster just didn't think the DVD was going to catch on so fast like it did. And so they failed in terms of their foresight. The other thing, so I'll get to the other thing later, but Diabarfarb, of course, was like any great leader, right, or anybody who's really smart, you always have a plan A in place, and then you always have a plan B in place just in case the other person says no. And so Diabarfarb's plan B in this case was to develop the DVD as not a rental, as a sell-through. So again, his plan B was to develop a sell-through window for the DVD. So as opposed to renting them at Blockbusters, Warren Diabarfarb then approached places like Walmart, specifically Walmart, and asked Walmart, would you be willing to sell DVDs on your shelves? And these DVDs would compete against the VHS rentals at the Blockbuster stores. And Walmart and the Targets, those stores, said yes. So Walmart being the first to say yes. And so Walmart accepts the deal, and so does Target eventually. And so essentially the business, right, shifts. It goes from a rental business to a sell-through business. So for a period of time, people were buying a lot of DVDs. The reason being, going back to my point about low prices, is that what Warren Diabarfarb did is that essentially he priced the DVD movies at the same price as CDs for music. So he put it at a pretty reasonable price, I think like $15 to $20, I want to say. And so then people for a period of time were buying lots of movies. Like for instance, years ago, I had a friend who was moving, and I think he had, I don't even remember, I would say at least 3,000 movie titles that he had bought over the years, and maybe more. I'm not kidding you. Walls and walls of movies, copies of movies, DVD copies that he had purchased. And I remember telling him, this is the reason you're single, dude, because, oh my God, all you do is watch movies. So anyways, so Netflix, right, could have purchased, Blockbuster could have purchased Netflix. I don't know if you guys know this or not. So this was obviously when Netflix was not the power, the force that it is today. And so Blockbuster could have bought them, and Blockbuster said no. They didn't do it. And again, I know you're thinking, oh, that's dumb. That's ridiculous. Lack of foresight, which partially it is. But the reason that Blockbuster didn't do it was because Blockbuster felt that they could beat Netflix. They didn't see the need to purchase Netflix. They felt they can defeat Netflix. And so actually Blockbuster was creating some sort of streaming model way before Netflix. But unfortunately, they ended up going into partnership with Enron. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the famous documentary on Enron. And so, and as if you know about Enron, it went bust. And so Blockbuster made a tactical error by developing a partnership with Enron, with the company that was, failed. And so really in 2002, Blockbuster really starts losing money, and it never really recovered for some of the reasons that I just told you. Well, Clinton, they did say no to a lot, and it's fair to say that they were a little bit arrogant. I would say would be a fair assessment in terms of like how they seen their competition. They thought they could defeat it. And you're right, they did say no. That they should have never said no to Warren Leverfarb, although I understand why they said no, but they shouldn't have said no. And Blockbuster, I don't know if greedy is the right word, but okay. So, because one thing about Blockbuster, they did acknowledge the fact that there was obviously a Netflix out there, and Netflix could obviously be a threat to them. So here's a short video talking a little bit about what happened to Blockbuster.
Locations.
Let me go back.
Everyone's head right now is that Netflix happened, and I'm sure it's going to be all over the comment section. But my conclusion at the end of the video is not that. Not exactly. But Netflix did survive when Blockbuster didn't, so what we should investigate is what separates the two companies. And I'm talking about the classic Netflix, not the streaming content, but sending DVDs to your house, because that's what Netflix was during this time. They didn't start streaming until around 10 years ago. As far as I see it, there were two big differences. One is what I just said. With Netflix, the movies come to you, whereas with Blockbuster, you go to the movies. So with Netflix, it's easier for the customer, but it's also more confining. There's more freedom with Blockbuster because you can get movies at any time without having to wait for the mail. This aspect is really just a matter of personal preference. But the other big difference is that Netflix is a subscription charge where Blockbuster charges per movie. This is where Netflix has the edge. For what you pay during your weekly trip to Blockbuster, you could get a full month of unlimited rentals. So the logical thing for Blockbuster to do to compete would be to offer subscriptions for unlimited rentals at their stores. But it's not as simple as it sounds. In fact, none of this is as simple as it sounds. Today, people seem to look at Blockbuster as a group of boneheads that failed to see the changing climate of video rentals. That's right, I said boneheads. I'll get back to the Netflixing in a second. The public seems to have this perception that Blockbuster thought in-store rentals was the only way to do business and just laughed at the idea of mail and streaming services. This isn't true. You may have heard this one before. In the year 2000, Blockbuster declined a deal to purchase Netflix for $50 million. A company that is worth billions today. But at the time, Blockbuster preferred to compete with them because they thought they could win. It wasn't that they were ignoring the business model that Netflix established, it's simply that they didn't think purchasing that company at that time was the right move. Sure, looking back, it's probably the worst decision they ever made, but how were they to know it at the time? I would have completely respected their decision to pass on the deal, and I'm sure most others would too. In fact, right around the same time, they entered into a 20-year deal that involved streaming video on demand using fiber optic technology that was much more costly than it would have been to purchase Netflix. The only problem is that the deal was with Enron, and the technology didn't work, and Enron went bankrupt soon after, and nothing came of it. It's a deal that could have put Blockbuster a couple steps ahead of Netflix. Here's some more evidence that Blockbuster wasn't ignorant about the whole mail and streaming thing. In a company's annual reports filed with the SEC, they include a section that identifies possible threats to the company. In almost every year that Netflix existed, they were listed as a possible threat, as well as video-on-demand services. And in the report from 2001, they actually talk about their efforts to enter into the market by teaming up with DirecTV. So don't make the mistake of thinking that Blockbuster was just ignoring all this. They were well aware of it and making efforts early on. But let's get back to why it's not easy to offer subscriptions like Netflix does. Those rental revenue numbers that I showed you earlier include something called late fees, something that's impossible to collect if the customer has an unlimited rental subscription. They were generating a healthy amount of income from late fees, and were resistant to change their structure to something that would completely eliminate them.
No more late fees! No more late fees! No more late fees! No more late fees!
However, in 2004, they started offering a subscription service called Blockbuster Movie Pass, and beginning the next year, they announced the elimination of late fees. But the thing is that if you're still renting out movies the traditional way, late fees are sort of necessary. They needed to have those movies back on time, and the motivation for the customer to do it was through the late fees. Their system was a little sketchy, where it gave the customer a grace period, and after enough time, they just said you owned it, and charged the full price of the movie. Eventually, they tried to enter every market. At the end of 2006, they launched Blockbuster Total Access, which was another online subscription service that allowed customers to check out multiple movies at a time. They could go through the mail just like Netflix, or exchange them at any Blockbuster store. It gained a lot of subscribers initially, but quickly went down. It was more expensive than Netflix, and I suppose the convenience of exchanging the movies in-store wasn't worth the extra money for the customer. They even tried Blockbuster Express, which was a DVD rental kiosk like Redbox, which eventually ended up in the hands of the Redbox people. In 2010, Blockbuster went bankrupt. Dish Network bought the company soon after, but haven't been able to do much with it. They've tried similar things, integrating it into their satellite service, but it seems they've basically given up. If you go to Blockbuster.com today, it's pretty vacant. Just a link to the Dish Network website and one to a list of the remaining locations. By the way,
So he does a really good job of explaining things that Blockbuster tried. And as some of you pointed out, Clinton especially, the whole idea of saying no. The idea of saying no a lot is problematic. And I think they should have said yes, at least to one of those two things, whether the Netflix or whether to Warren Lieberforb. And maybe things would have worked out differently for Blockbuster. But I think the Blockbuster case is really interesting because shows you how quickly technology changes and how quickly you can go from being a cool brand, right, to a dead brand, right? A vibrant brand to a dead brand can happen very quickly, especially in the world of entertainment, if you don't keep up with trends or if you make poor decisions, I suppose. All right, so home entertainment in terms of revenue, obviously US revenue when it comes to home entertainment, largely because we've been stuck at home because of the coronavirus, has skyrocketed. Especially the part that has skyrocketed is digital revenue. So again, digital revenue has skyrocketed in the United States. It has gone up by over 32%. So again, digital revenue has gone up by over 32%. It is now at $26.5 billion, and that's 2020 revenue. And physical revenue has gone way down. It's gone down to $3.5 billion. So we have digital is going way up, physical is going down. So what I mean by physical, I mean the physical buying of a DVD, right, is going down. Even the physical rental is going down, but people are buying digital copies of movies or streaming stuff. And so the industry itself is at a $31 billion in the United States, and it's tracking upwards. And so in some ways, right, the fact that the home video industry is going up kind of offsets the fact that the movie industry, at least for theatrical, has gone way down. It sort of offset it a little bit. The 2019 figures here that you see right here are 2019 figures. I haven't found 2020 figures yet for international, but my sense is that the international revenue streams for digital and physical is going to be pretty much identical to the United States. Digital is going to keep going up. Electronic sell-throughs, video on demand, those sorts of things are going to keep going up. And of course, the physical abroad, right? I think people all over the world are buying less physical copies of movies. And so, when it comes to revenue sharing, what I mean by revenue sharing, it's a revenue sharing deal between the retailer and the distributor. So, for instance, Walmart still sells some DVDs. If you go to Target, they still sell some DVDs. And so what ends up happening is a distributor, again, for sale doctrine, the distributor sells the retailer the DVD at a wholesale price, and then the retailer upsells it right at a retail price. And so they essentially revenue share the home entertainment transaction. Part goes to the studio, and part goes to the retailer, whether that retailer happens to be Target, whether that retailer happens to be Walmart. Now, in 2018, for the first time ever, what happened was that online subscriptions, right, or streaming, if you think about, again, Disney Plus or Amazon or Netflix, for the first time ever, those sorts of subscriptions exceeded cable subscriptions for the very first time. So again, online subscriptions exceeded cable subscriptions for the very first time in 2018, and that's still tracking the same way. Subscriptions keep going up, and cable subscriptions keep going down. So more and more of us are cutting the cord, right? And some of us, by the way, may have never had a cord, right? So, but a lot of us are cord cutting or cord shaving. In other words, you're getting the basic package or you're cutting all together. And largely because the cost of cable is so high. Revenue sharing is a revenue sharing deal between the retailer and the distributor, where the distributor gives a copy at wholesale rate to the retailer. The retailer sells it at a retail price, upsells it. So they're essentially revenue sharing. So currently, by the way, this number is old. So my sense is this number is well over 900 million, if not 1 trillion by now, honestly, because Disney Plus is doing so well. But online subscription has been skyrocketing, especially since Disney Plus came onto the scene, and especially since Amazon and Netflix have gone more global. The number of subscriptions, I'm sure, by now has probably reached 1 trillion, if not exceeded 1 trillion. So digital is how Americans now consume content, and less so, we don't consume content on cable anymore. So interesting. Rough guess, are we talking about globally or are we talking in the United States, Clinton? I can tell you US numbers are about 85 million households. And that's, by the way, way down. It used to be well over 100 million. And so every year that's been tracking downwards. So right now it's it's between 80 and 85 right now. My guess by the end of 2021, we'll be at about 75 million if it keeps going the way it's going in the United States.
Do you think that cable will eventually go away?
Yes, eventually. But
Professor?
I would say within 10 years, 10 to 15 years. Yes.
Yes, I wanted to put in the information on there. How about when they had to change? I know that people used to get television channels without any disruption. I know at some point back there was a change to go digitize. Did that
Yes.
increase the number of cable users for that reason?
Yes, it did. Because we were kind of forced to, right, with technology. But now, as we move forward, it's easy. We can bypass the cable. You no longer need a cable signal anymore. With the over-the-top services, with whether it's Netflix or whether it's whatever, all you need really is just kind of a hotspot or internet. You can bypass the traditional services. So that's why I think eventually cable will be a dinosaur, eventually. Another question. So what is the top selling DVD? It is Frozen 2. Frozen 2 was the top selling DVD. And the street date, again, the street date means the first day that it's on the shelves, right, for retailers, or first day available to sell for retailers, was February 11th. Not that you have to know that, but again, Frozen 2, street date was February 11th, which is a Tuesday. And as you can see here, right, generally speaking, the way it works for home video, just like anything else, this is why theatrical is so important, is that box office hits, the better the movie does at the box office, the more DVDs it will sell, or more streams it will have. Any sort of family-friendly movie, again, tends to sell a lot in DVDs or ends up streaming a lot. They generally make more money because these movies generally make good gifts. They're classy gifts that you can give to a family, because those kids, right, especially if they like Disney, are going to watch that movie over and over again. And the ethnic group, at least historically, that's most likely to get an online subscription, most likely to buy electronic sell-through, most likely to do a video on demand, most likely to buy or rent a physical copy, was Latinx. Latinx is the group that's most likely to consume entertainment at their homes. So distribution and marketing. So distribution and marketing, the home video portion of this is in charge of all the posters and display towers and the in-store trailers. If they have any ads in the stores or signage, they're responsible for. Let's see if I had one that I used here. Here we go. So as you can see here, right, this pretty elaborate display for Jurassic Park, and this is obviously at a Walmart. If you look at the logo. So the home video division, right, the distribution part of home video, who works with the retailers, needs to make sure the display gets put up, right? Or sometimes they'll actually bring out people who work for the studio, or they'll outsource, who will put up the display on their behalf to make it look nice and cool. So when the street date comes along, people will see, oh my God, look at, there's Jurassic Park. I recognize the dinosaurs. And so the marketing part and the distribution part of home video is responsible for those sorts of things. They're also responsible for putting out trailers that promote the fact that the movie's going to be released on DVD. So for example, this.
Wake up, T'Challa. Wake up. My son, it is your time to be king.
Who need a hero? Hero. You need a hero. Look in the mirror. There go your hero. Who on the front lines at ground zero? Hero.
I now present to you the Black Panther.
My king.
Stop it. Stop it. I am not ready to be without you.
You decide what kind of king you are going to be.
You're a good man with a good heart. And it's hard for a good man to be a king. One more word, and I will feed you to my children. I'm kidding, we are vegetarians.
Tell me who's gonna see me from the center.
The world took everything away from me, but I'm gonna make sure we're even. I'm gonna burn it all. He's a monster of our own making. I must right these wrongs.
When Black Panther fights for Wakanda, I will be right there.
Wakanda forever! I am your king now! What happens now determines what happens to the rest of the world.
So again, the DVD, the marketing division and distribution division is responsible for all this sort of stuff. The marketing part, again, making people aware that they're going to release a DVD into the retail stores. They're responsible for that. Sometimes the home video department changes the key art. The key art, again, is the central marketing image, right? This doesn't happen very often. They only really change the key art if the movie was not a box office hit. So they might change it if different, but generally speaking, this doesn't happen very often. Solicitation date generally is 90 days prior to street date. So again, 90 days prior to street date is solicitation date. In other words, this is the time when essentially the studios or the distributor lets the retailer, Walmart or Target, know this is the date that we're going to release our movie into the retail stores, 90 days in advance. And so the category captain, who again is the person who's talking to these retail outlets, has this information. The category captain lets the Target or the Walmarts know, hey, this particular movie is going to be released at this time, so get your shelves ready as we get closer to that time. Marketing and distributions also, marketing is in charge of the highlighting different versions. So every once in a while, the studio and the director don't agree on the final cut. And you know this because there'll be a director's cut. And so the director sometimes, depending on their contract with the studio, will just say, fine, I'll let you, the studio release this version, but this is the version that I liked better. And so the marketing division, right, highlights the fact that, oh, this might be a different version. This is going to be a director's cut, which means that it may have different scenes in it. Oftentimes have extra content. So the outtakes and the interviews. So what I mean by that, oftentimes, right, if you ever watched these DVDs, at the end, this is my favorite part of buying DVDs, the few that I do have, is listening to the interviews from the stars or the director or the writer. These interviews are sometimes, if you rent a comedy, they'll have outtakes, funny takes that didn't make it into the movie, but are pretty funny. Anyways, those sorts of things, the extra content is the key to selling DVDs. Again, the extra content is the key to selling these DVDs. Getting some insight from the interviews, getting to watch the outtakes, those sorts of things tend to be the reason why people buy these DVDs. And so the distributor, again, going back to the studio, has to make sure that they secure shelf space, again, by letting the category captain know and having the category captain tell the retailer to clear the shelf space so they can put on the movies onto the shelves. And generally speaking, the way traditionally works to avoid empty shelves, because the last thing that studio wants is to have empty shelves, because the chances of you actually buying the movie again, if it's sitting on the if it's empty and you were looking for it, it's not like you're going to go back and buy it, because a lot of DVD sales are impulse buys. And so to avoid empty shelves, they have something called point of purchase, POP. POP stands again for point of purchase. And so point of purchase essentially means every time you buy a copy, right, essentially when you buy it at the register, a signal or that message gets sent to the distributor, and the distributor goes, oh, okay, we still have 3 copies left on the shelves. We need to send that Target in this particular store more copies because they're running out. So that's having the point of purchase lets the distributor know that copies are selling quickly, we need to send them more. That's how they avoid the empty shelf scenario. Now, going down to how much revenue, I'm referring down here to how much revenue the studios keep. So anytime for home entertainment, the studios keep 80% of the revenue. Again, the studios keep 80% of all revenue made in home entertainment, which, it's kind of sketchy how they came up with that number. Again, 80% of all revenue is kept by the studios, and I'm referring to revenue made in home entertainment. Any questions?
Yeah, can you go through again really quickly? What was the important thing you said about securing shelf space?
You want to avoid having empty shelves.
Okay. And then
securing shelf space. You want to make sure that the retailer empties shelves or makes room for your DVDs.
Okay. And then you said something about who was responsible for the poster, display towers, etc.
It's the marketing division.
Okay.
Of the home entertainment industry.
Mm-hmm.
They either go out there, they either go out to the retail store themselves, or they outsource it and have one of the representatives put up the material, or sometimes they ask the people who work for Walmart or Target if they can do it.
Okay, and then who produces the key art?
Generally, the studio does, but sometimes they might change the key art if the movie failed.
Okay, and then extra content is the key to selling.
Yes.
80% of the revenue. How much is the revenue total? Or did you say like a specific amount, or is it just the 80% that you specified?
We get 80%.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I got everything that might be on the exam.
Well, this will be on the next exam.
Okay.
Oh, but it will be on this week's quiz, so that's what you got to worry about initially.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so let's talk about more current stuff, since we talked about a lot of old stuff. So how much time do I have left? My goodness. It's okay. So Netflix, obviously right now it's the largest streaming service, although honestly Amazon is catching up, and so is Disney Plus. They're catching up fast. So that's going to be really interesting. But as of right now, as of me speaking to you at this moment, it is the #1 or the world's largest streaming service as of right now. It's at 203 million subscribers. It has been growing as well. It's just not growing as fast as Disney Plus. So it was the first streaming service to join the Motion Picture Association of America. So again, it's the first streaming service to join the MPAA. First streaming service to join the MPAA. So the Motion Picture Association of America is historically all the studios, right? It's Disney, Universal, Sony, those studios, the big boys, Lionsgate. They're all part of the Motion Picture Association of America. But now they've let in a streaming service into the Motion Picture Association of America, which is interesting. So now Netflix is a part of the MPAA. And so what happened during the pandemic, the number of subscribers have grown during the pandemic. And so again, as of 2019, I don't know, as of 2020, it was rated as the favorite streaming service for people who like to stream their contents. So as of 2019, we'll see what happens when I read the research on 2020. My sense is that's not going to be the case in 2020. That's my sense. I don't know. Anyway, so historically, they've been able to hold off competitors, whether that competitor was Blockbuster, whether that competitor was Redbox. They've been able to hold off their competitors. They to a certain extent been able to hold off Amazon. We'll see what happens with Disney Plus. Historically, they get their content through, well, historically they would have revenue sharing deals from the distributor, meaning that every time you rented that particular movie, right, through Netflix, they would give a portion of that revenue to the distributors. That's how they did it historically. Now, more recently, now they just pay a licensing fee. So again, how do they get their content now? They just pay a licensing fee. They just pay a fee to, well, Disney's kind of going away. They'll pay a fee to Warner Brothers. They'll pay a fee to HBO. They'll pay a fee to ABC. They'll pay a fee to whoever the distributor happens to be, a licensing fee. Now, historically, also, they used to push their older content, older movies. The reason that they used to push their older movies was because they owned them, and so they didn't have to pay a license. They didn't have to pay revenue sharing with these other studios. So they would push these older movies, so you would rent those and not the newer stuff. That's historically speaking. And so they've totally changed the way we consume content. If you think about the idea of binge watching, right? You can essentially watch an entire season of episodes in one day. So are distributors essentially renting space? They don't rent the space, Amanda. They essentially ask the retailers if they provide them with space. But it's a tricky question, because on some level they are paying for it on some level. If that makes sense. I would think that retailers purchase X amount of, they do ask the retailer, and the retailer does. This is where the retailer is really important. The retailer essentially, they ask, will you place our content at eye level? They'll ask that, but really that's the category captain that asks that, and then it's up to the retailer to go ahead and do that. The one thing I'm going to kind of off topic a little bit here, Amanda, but food actually, for food, shelf space for food, you actually do got to pay for it. I don't know if you guys know that or not. So in this space, it's a little bit different, but in essence, you are paying for it to a certain extent. But it's not exactly as you go into a grocery store, which is a little bit different. In a grocery store, you actually pay for, well, think about it, right? Think about why the name brands are at a certain level, and the no-name brands are usually down somewhere below. They're not as easy to find. Very good point, Shelby. That's a very good point. I was going to get to that. That's a very good point. So the idea of changing the perception, or changing the way we consume content, binge watching, again, when I was your age, when the dinosaurs ran around, So literally, you had to watch one episode and that was it. You couldn't binge watch. It would be one episode a week and that would be it. But since Netflix has emerged, especially the streaming part, you can essentially watch an entire season of content in one day, right? If you like the Ozarks, you can watch an entire season of the Ozarks in one entire day. And it's also changed production. In other words, we'll get into this later, but for cable TV or for network television, it's usually a certain number of episodes is a season, right? So for TV historically, it's between 20 and 26 episodes is a season. For cable TV, depending if it's HBO could be 12 or 13. More like an AMC sort of thing could range from a few episodes to to many. It just ranges. And for Netflix, there's really no length. It could be 7 episodes or it can be 15. There's really no uniformed length. It models a little bit of premium cable, or I should say seasons. I'm talking about length. So for length, what I'm talking about here is length of the show. So again, for network television, if you think about the sitcom, right? The sitcom has to be 24 minutes long to include commercials on ABC. If it's an hour-long drama, it has to be 44 minutes long to take into account commercials. For Netflix, right, that episode could be 35 minutes in terms of length. That episode could be 42 minutes in terms of length. That episode could be an hour and 10 minutes in terms of length. There's no uniformity when it comes to length. And so the last thing I'm going to talk about here, because I think it's already 3:45. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. So the program that helped put Netflix on the map is it's the House of Cards. So House of Cards is the first TV show that Netflix actually produced that put Netflix on the map in terms of production. It was a huge hit. It was a huge breakthrough for Netflix because really prior to that, Netflix had relied very heavily on licensed content. And so House of Cards helped put Netflix on the map, and it also helped to vertically integrate the industry, or not industry, but Netflix. In terms, what I mean by that is that Netflix now is able to control the production and also the distribution, as well as even the exhibition, some would say, of content. Yeah, it was a great series. Yeah, I don't know. It's very unfortunate. Kevin Spacey is such a great actor, but yeah, I'm very unfortunate that he did what he did. I don't know. So that's somebody who obviously deserves to be canceled. Unfortunately, it hurt the show immensely. So any last questions? As I say, au revoir, goodbye, have a good week.
Yeah, I have a question. I kind of came in just a tad bit, not too late, just a few minutes. When you were discussing about the exam, for the exam, you said that there's no study guide, but will the questions basically be based off of the quizzes that we took?
Absolutely, that's your study guide, is your quizzes.
Oh, awesome. And will the quizzes be open for us to go back and study them, or no?
Yes, it should be open now, as a matter of fact, I think. No?
I have to go check.
Okay.
But awesome. Thank you so much.
Quizzes were closed, I think. Do you know which quiz was closed, Amanda?
Dr. Puente, now that she brings that up, a question I had is
correct answers are listed, I believe. They used to be listed on the old platform. I think they're listed also on Canvas.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I couldn't, and I kept forgetting to ask this, but whenever I try to go back, it just tells me which ones I got wrong, but it won't tell me the correct answer. So I
Oh,
wasn't able to like correct myself after getting it
okay.
wrong.
I'll see if I can push a button that can open that up.
Okay,
I,
cool.
Find-
Thank you.
I see mine
I
and it
learned
does show the
Canvas.
correct. And
Excuse
then
me?
once I see the ones that I got correct and the incorrect one does point now to the correct one.
It does?
Yeah, so it says you answer and then it gives you the correct answer.
Oh, okay.
It's not showing up for my.
I don't know. I wonder if I don't know. Okay. I thought it did that, but I wasn't sure. I'll have to double check.
Okay, thank you.
But
Not
Nice
all of
weekend.
the quizzes have that option though,
They don't?
Professor. No, I looked at quiz 1, it did, and quiz 2, it says correct answers are hidden. So I'm not even able to see the quiz at all.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
get on all my quizzes.
I'll
Correct
try to
answers
do
are
everything
hidden.
like I did quiz 1. Obviously, I did the right thing in quiz 1, and I didn't do the right thing in quiz 2, in quiz 3. So I'll try to change that. So you can all view the answers. Because that's honestly, that is your study guide. It's literally the quizzes.
Oh, so yeah, we
And then-
can't see the correct answer, so we'd appreciate if you double check that.
Okay. Will do.
I have one more question. When will the exam be open?
Good question.
Is it like next week or 2?
I'll try to have it up by Monday. It might be even up by Sunday, but Monday at the latest.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions, folks?
Yeah, I have one question. For the interview project, say if the person that I choose to reach out to, she was an intern for a radio station as a broadcaster, and then her time was up, and then she went into like the industry solo, and then now she's kind of taking a break. Will you still accept that interviewee?
Does she know anybody?
Or does she have to?
Do you know anybody does she know anybody who's still working in the industry?
I'm pretty sure she does, yeah.
I would reach out to her and ask her if there's just somebody that you can reach out to that she knows. And have her do the introduction.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, that makes it easier, so it's not just you randomly asking this person for an interview. It'd be cool if your friend, I don't know your friend, if she would, introduce you to her friend.
Oh well, she's not my friend. She's
Okay.
somebody that's kind of like a social media influencer. And I started following her because because she started working for Power 106.
Mm-hmm.
Like she was an intern for Power 106. Then she took a break. Then she went into some like Hispanic type of radio station.
Okay.
And then because of COVID, like her segment had to like close down in a sense. And I believe she's taking a break, but she does have history. So can I still interview her if I reach out to her and she accepts it? Or you prefer them to actually be in the industry right now?
Ideally, I want them to be working in the industry right now.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have one more question. I'm sorry. For the project quiz, the portfolio, you said that we had to create a portfolio in under Fullerton's website. I never done that before, so
Okay.
I'm kind of lost on how to do.
You gotta look for portfolio.
Just type it up.
Uh-huh. because Portfolium is part of the
Thank
university.
you.
It's the whole university is doing a Portfolium.
Oh, portfolio. Okay. And then if I have any troubles, can I come back and ask you questions for guidance?
Oof. Are you asking technical questions or something that can really help you with?
I guess it's just more of like trying to find my way to make a portfolio.
That's a technical question. So you should ask the folks who work for Portfolium. They're actually really good. If you go onto the Portfolium website, they will help you in terms of developing your website. But I've never had I don't know. I've never had a student at least tell me they had any issues developing their own Portfolium or Portfolium page.
Okay. I just never made one before, and this is my first time ever hearing about it. So that's why I was like kind of confused. Like, whoa, wait, where do we go? How does this work? You know?
Mm-hmm. Have you taken 317 yet?
No, I haven't.
You haven't? Okay. Interesting. What are you taking right now? Just out of
No.
curiosity.
I am taking 310, 346, COM 101, 102, and then CTVA 302.
I see. So nobody's doing a Portfolium or portfolio?
I've done one before.
I haven't.
Interesting. I'm just curious. Just wanted to know who's doing what.
Alyssa, I can help you with that because I did take 317 a couple semesters back, and it's part of the university. It links it on there. So if you want to reach out, I'll look it up and then I'll probably send you an email through Canva.
That's awesome. I don't know who said that, but that's
Okay.
Zulma.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, let me make a
Thank
note.
you so
So
much.
that would be the person. Yes, Zuma or whoever's taking 317, because 317. That's why I asked if you're taking 317. It's part of your assignment for 317 is actually to create your own portfolio, right? Is that correct, Zuma?
that is correct. You're adding on to that as you do projects. It's not really integrated into other classes other than 317 because you can upload like your Photoshop and your videos up there. If you're going to be going for the media certificate, that's also what you're going to be adding onto as well.
Okay.
Digital media.
Right.
And I know that's where they incorporate it, and that is one of the things that you do have to do at the beginning. But I can help you with that. I'm going to look it up and then I'll try to email you that info, Alyssa.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay. I'm gonna send you my email on here individually if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Zuma.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Dr. Puente, I wanted to stay after just for a few moments with you. I don't know if you want to stop recording or.
Oh. Thank you for that. I would have forgot again.